Good morning and welcome to this week's recruitment discussion with a jump. And this week we are going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about, are our recruiters just good at filling jobs, or are they now good at also finding new clients? And we're seeing so many questions like this out over the sort of last couple of weeks that we thought we'd pull a webinar together on this sort of front, because I do think we've lost potentially the art of selling. As usual, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much indeed. Jim would love you to subscribe and love you to comment on everything that we've put on YouTube, etc. And before we start today's session, I want to share some facts with you. But these are not opinions. They're not coaching points. These are numbers that tell you exactly where we are today and what's going on. And there's some really interesting stuff when you start to dig into the marketplace. So a benchmark study. In the chat, I'm also going to put out all the facts and where they came from. So you've got all of those. So there's a benchmark study with about 2,100 recruitment firms. And they found that the top 25% of run businesses that ran business development as a constant operation alongside up their delivery. So they were doing business development every single day, regardless of how busy they were. They found that the rest treat it as something that will slow their business down rather than delivery. And what they found, this was an American study, the single difference in the habit of doing business development every day created a difference per head of $168,000 difference because people were doing business development every day. The second one, which was a really interesting one, the second one was about how your consultants actually spend their time every week. And this was research across recruitment firms in the UK. And they found the average consultant spent 52% of their time each week on admin, 28% of their time on candidate sourcing. Business development did not appear on that list at all. Not at the bottom, not anywhere. So it's your team. So I think that they were talking about the team that was lacking the skills. So if you've never built a structure where BD is a protected slot in the working week, you find that people actually don't do business development. And that's the certain things that we find when we go into certain businesses anyway. The third stat was from a recruitment agency M&A report, and it said client concentration is significantly the most heavily weighted risk factor a buyer examines. If a single client represents more than 30% of your business revenue, buyers tend to discount your multiples. If your top 3 clients account for more than 50%, some buyers will not proceed at all because they feel that is too much of a risk. The agency that commands the best exits are the one where 10% clients, well, their top 10 clients account for anywhere between 20 and 30% of the combined revenue. No single client was above 15%. So if you really want to look at what your BD should actually be doing, it should be looking at how it generates revenue, but also how it generates a valuation of your business. And the fourth fact isn't a fact, but it was a question that sort of came out. If your top 3 clients paused all their hiring tomorrow, how many months would your business last? And I want you to sit with that as a question for a second, because if that's not the question about BD, I don't know what is, but that's what we're going to cover today. So as I said, I'm going to put all the sources in the chat. So if you want to have a look in the chat, have a look from there. Dave's back with us today. So welcome back, Dave, from there. And we're going to kick off with some, I think we're going to kick off with an interesting question. You know, when we sit with consultants who fill roles brilliantly, but have never opened clients, how quickly can you tell whether they can actually do business development? And in that stage, what are you actually looking for?
I guess for me, it depends on what they've been hired to do and the skill set they have. So I would be asking the person who is, shall we call them a delivery person, who is used to selling within a client or a specific group of clients. What does your client need? So they need to understand, what does your client need? Because you could do business development within an existing client or within an existing company that's part of a client portfolio, rather than just sticking with one area and one delivery area. So what does your client need? And then to look at the L&D, the learning and development that they need. So find out questions about the client, what's going on the client side, and then map what are the skills that you see for your business is the skills that a delivery person has and the skills that a business development person has or business development person needs. Most people who are running recruitment businesses have run their own business before or have been in a business development capacity. You get very few delivery, in my experience, Howard, and I don't know whether this is true, but you get for you, but you get very few people who've set up and created a recruitment business who have come from a delivery background in a recruitment business. They're normally people who are BD. So you know as a leader that within your skills, you've got business development ability because you've got out on your own. Well, if that's the case, what are those skills? And map them to the consultants that you're working with that have got this ability to deliver, but we are assuming not the business ability to do business development. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard recruitment consultants say, yeah, but I'm not very good at BD. I don't really want to do BD. I'm much more of a delivery person. And I think that has to be challenged for all the reasons and all the stats that you've given, Howard. It's really important. And then you, as the leader, need to put down an action plan to see who is going to make it and be able to do BD and who has the skills that need to be trained. Because everybody could do it. It's just whether they have the skills, the appetite, the intuition, the confidence to get on and do it.
So I think if we start from that delivery standpoint, my sort of view when I've sort of gone into clients with multiple candidate consultants in there doing various different things is watch what they do in the gaps, the moments in between the calls. So are they chasing one more CV? Are they picking up the phone to actually call somebody else in that spot? So
Yeah,
do
yeah,
they do they pull leads? Do they follow up on those leads? Do they tell you when they've done it? Do they ask you for help to follow up on their leads, or do they just go out and do that? So I'm looking for people who are proactive, not reactive. And sometimes it's listening to their language. They talk about the clients as people with problems to solve, or is it they talking to about a client about an account that needs to be serviced? And I think then when you start to ask them, if every live role you're working on disappeared tomorrow, what would you do? And that answer to me is the diagnostic of what they would actually start to do. And most leaders are looking for confidence as a signal. And I think that's wrong. Some of your best sort of future developers are the quiet ones, the curious ones, the
yeah,
ones that are completely invisible to you to a certain point, but they're not doing. So I think it's rarely, you know, I think it rarely starts with a consultant. It starts with the leader. Have they recruited the right person? You were talking about looking for the right person. Have they recruited the right person? So do they know the attributes that they're looking for in an interview? Once they start that, has the employee actually got those attributes? And have you actually then told them what you want to develop from your relationship with them? Or have you been the leader that's been lazy and just assumed that they're going to work it out? So therefore it's hope. So look at what you reward in your one-to-ones. So if every conversation is about filling roles and never about relationship development, you've already answered your diagnostic question for them, isn't it? It's always about filling. So that willingness to be uncomfortable on the phone is a signal. I think that a lot of people are very uncomfortable on the phone at the moment. And I think it's that natural charm. And once that charm fades, it's the persistence that I want. I want someone who is the recruiter that understands that they've got to keep calling clients back, understand that not every client is going to be a yes. And I want to understand what they are great at is knowing not the answers that your clients want to ask for, but knowing better questions to ask. And I
yeah, yeah,
think a lot
yeah,
of consultants fear not knowing the answer. It's not about not knowing the answer. I think it's about knowing better questions to ask that then gets you to a decision. So I think we've got to start to think that your strongest future business developers are the ones that you've probably never asked in your business
yeah,
because you didn't know they're there. And that's not a talent gap. I think that's a leadership gap. And we need to sort of plug that very, very quickly. And I think behaviors matter. So when we sort of look at the next stage, we've often talked about volume and we always say it's about call volume, and lots of agencies that we go to say it's about call volume, so I think it's about behaviors. So what are the three behaviors you actually look for when you're trying to work out whether someone is winning clients or just making noise in them? And I think there's a lot of difference at the moment. There's a lot of difference between people who are making noise in a client and then so those that are actually out winning clients.
And this takes me back out to answer the question. There were three things that I looked for. So I inherited a business that was very heavily delivery focused, had a number of big preferred supplier lists in the financial services sector, but there was very little new business. And my choice was, do I go and hire lots of new business people, or are there some new business people inherent in the team that I've already got? And the three things that I look for is to the individual consultants, the questions I wanted to satisfy myself with. When they're talking to their clients, do they arrive with insight? Are they a specialist in what they're selling? You know, the first interaction or the second interaction with a client is a valuable one. And are they being valuable to that client regardless of the outcome? In other words, do they have the capacity and the ability to build on a relationship and to make a relationship based on insight? The second one is, do they have the ability to diagnose the real problem on the client side, not just the stated vacancy? Thanks for your vacancy, I'll go off and fill it. Or do they have the business acumen and intelligence to say, actually, well, what's the real problem? Why is this vacancy arisen? What's going on behind it? What happens if we fill this vacancy? What happens to you if we fill this vacancy? And have a conversation which can lead to a bit more of a solid building relationship. And the third one, and I've seen this so many times with people who are calling clients, make sure that the follow up is with substance, not persistence. I called them, they weren't available. I called them, they weren't available. I called them, they're not interested. They called me and said, call back in 6 months' time. I called me and somebody else to speak to. And they just keep persistently going through a list of calls to try to get some new business. Where if you're calling with substance, I found this piece of market data, I thought you'd be interested in it. I've got some insight for you. I think this would be of value. And you're not thinking there's going to be an outcome straight away. You are going to be in a much better position to determine whether the people you've got have the ability to build relationships and to build business development.
So that very much reminds me when we started Jump, when we started going through what our values were. And one of the values that came out was curiosity. And I
Yep,
always think that
yep,
as a good consultant, one of the first things I look for is that person curious? Has that consultant got 3 to 5 really good questions that they can ask the client before they actually tell the client what they do? So what are they trying to develop out of the client? And your comment about follow-up there, I don't think the follow-up should feel like it's chasing. The
no,
best consultants build reasons to give somebody a call back. They give reasons why they should be in the diary every few weeks. And that has nothing to do with a live vacancy. That has everything to do with what the client's doing. And then I think the third one is about that building that relationship when people aren't hiring, because most people aren't hiring. So, you know, by the time that role exists, they should have already built the obvious from the call because they've been curious. They've built reasons to call. They understand what that business is about. And I think volume is what people do when they have no other measure. And I think activity is only a number on a dashboard. And if you're looking at that number on a dashboard and that's what you're trying to coach around activity, then you're coaching the wrong things. You start to look at the agencies nowadays that are pulling away, they're the ones that are having conversation with the clients about their plans, not for today, but for the next quarter, the next half year, the next year. And it's not just about the next vacancy. They're talking about product specific. They talk about when you go to a client, they're not talking just as a perm consultant or a temp consultant or a contract consultant. They're talking about recruitment as a service and how recruitment as a service works rather than just one product. So therefore, the client gets a full understanding of the business rather than understanding of a third of the business. So it's about being remembered for the right reasons. It's not about doing a lot of calls. It's actually being understood why you're trying to build that call, why you're trying to build that relationship. And I think the best business developers I've coached, they treat every placement as the start of a relationship. And that's a relationship with the candidate market. So it's not a transactional, because that person they've just placed may come back to them as a client. However, it's also about engaging with all those other candidates that were in that recruitment process, and they're building genuine talent pools, not just shortlists that's never going to be revisited. They're building talent pools from there. So I think if your team's BD activity disappeared tomorrow, if your client didn't notice for 3 months, you've got a problem. And that tells you everything about the relationship that you've built with your client. That if you didn't call a client for 3 months, would they call you? And so if that's the case and you're going to answer, yes, they wouldn't call us, you haven't got a relationship with your client.
No,
You haven't got
that's
an
right.
in-depth relationship with your client. And that's what the best business developers do. They create that relationship. Let's talk about their methodology. Most business development methodology dies within a month of an idea or training that launched them. What is it about the way most agencies build their business development strategies that almost guarantee that it doesn't work?
I think, if you want to get a really good eye roll from some recruitment consultants, and this is a bit of a general statement, it say to them, right, we're going to do some training. And then you get, oh, really? Now, either some will look at training as, oh, good, it avoids me doing what I'm supposed to be doing in my day job. And some look at it of, I don't really want any training. And it's a shame on both cases if that's the case, because actually to have a really good business development training program, for example, twice in two different companies, I've used the Miller-Hyman method of sales and business development. It's a brilliant, articulate way of developing businesses, of business development, of understanding your customer, of account planning and account management, all of that. But it's quite intense and it requires quite a lot of work. And many consultants don't want to do that extra bit of work because, to the point, a lot of our society today is about instant win, instant gratification, rather than really got to work at it, you've got to push it, you've got to be challenged on it. And to your point, Howard, if it hasn't worked in 4 weeks, yeah, don't ditch it. Let's look at what's happening, why it hasn't worked, what can we do? So it's about having a process that people buy into. And for the ones that aren't buying into it, you as a leader having a conversation saying, why isn't this working for you? Because this is the way we do things around here. This is our expectation of you. This is the training we're prepared to make you better at this particular skill or this particular aspect. And it's about perseverance. And you use the word, one of my favorite words, how you use it, curiosity. Are your recruitment consultants curious about their clients, curious about what's going on with their clients, curious about what movement there is in the candidate market, curious about explaining that to the people they're speaking to? Because if they are, that's just all parts of business development. That's helping them to get a little bit closer to the people they need to be closer to. And if your company has invested training in them, don't do in the old days, you used to have a training manual and you then used to sit on the shelf and you have to refer to it. Now it's instant. You can go onto YouTube, you can go onto our site. There's plenty of sites where you can get that. But if you make it a habit, we've spoken before, haven't we, Howard, about habits? If you make learning and training about BD a habit, then everybody does it. And those that have success from it straight away, let's sing their praises and let's get it that part of our culture here is instead of 0% doing business development, it's 20% or 30%, whatever the number is.
It's interesting. I wrote a post, a newsletter on Friday about the 95% versus the 5%. 95% of every recruitment agency does the same thing. It's the 5% that makes you different, and that's what people look for. So when you
Yeah.
start to think about that business development strategy, most of it's borrowed from someone else's framework. But most of that framework, again, is not based about what's actually happening in the market today with their clients, with their consultants, and how they actually work. And if you sort of think 3 years ago, the average recruitment life cycle was just over 4 weeks. It's now over 8.5 weeks. And we're all complaining that clients are taking longer to make decisions, but we're not changing our business development strategy and our recruitment strategy to match that. I also think that when we launch, we generally launch with loads of energy and then leave it to survive because we actually
Yeah,
haven't
that's true.
put
Yeah,
any structure around it. There's no methodology, there's no rhythm, and I think I use that word quite a lot. There's no rhythm to the business that then holds it in place. And as I said, you talked about training. I think they train once and then never review because, well, I've trained you once, you should be able to do it. So they don't calculate the risk of not continuing. And most of all, they don't build it for the market today. They build it based on the market that they knew that's probably long since gone. And I think leaders treat BD as that one-off event rather than something that needs coaching, reinforcing, readjusting every single week. So BD to me is that daily process.
yeah,
And I'll
yeah,
repeat that BD is a daily process, not only for the roles that you've got, but also for the roles that you don't. And that first stat that I read out absolutely proved that with regards to the top 25% of those companies, of 2,100 companies that were reviewed, they all had a daily BD culture. Okay. And so I think most methodologies fail, not because the content is wrong, it's because the leaders stop talking about it. And the moment people stop talking about it, it stops becoming urgent.
yeah,
And once it stops becoming urgent, then it's never followed up. And I think that methodology only sticks if it's simple enough. And again, I always think of a consultant, if I put a new methodology into a consultant, I want them to be able to explain it back to me in 2 sentences. If they can't, it's probably too much for them to take in. It needs a better implementation because it's not going to survive. And I think we need to build it around what our clients and candidates actually want in the market today, not a generic version of what everybody else is using and everybody else sees, because I think the market is changing so quickly at the moment and we're not reacting to that, and nor are we then changing our actual processes that. So it's interesting. I remember sort of going into, I'm working with a client in the south at the moment, probably got about 20 heads in the business, and they brought out their business development methodology pamphlet, which was a 25 to 30 page document. And after page two, it already got me lost. You know, so if your methodology doesn't fit on a single sheet and therefore can't be used every single day, then we've got to think about what we're doing. And I think that's the bit of why
yeah,
BD dies, is because we make it too complex and people then fear that complexity.
yeah, yeah.
We must come across this next question quite a lot, which is again one of the reasons why I sort of wrote the question. What does a weekly coaching conversation actually sound like? The one that builds BD capabilities without making your people feel like they're being managed out of what they're already good at.
Yeah, and we have these conversations all the time. How so? The first tip, if you want, the first thing that we look at is it starts with their wins, not your agenda. So it's not about me sitting down with you trying to make you better at BD. It's looking at their wins, even if it's a small win. A good call, a sharp observation with a client, a piece of insight that they delivered. It's not flattery, it's anchoring the conversation in their capability rather than the gap that you perceive. Saying to somebody, we're building on something good here is much more encouraging than how many calls have you made. The second one goes back to that curiosity. It's curiosity based. It's not performance based. Please don't ask, how many BD calls did you make this week? But please do ask, tell me about what you learned from that conversation with a client or that prospect that surprised you. Yeah. Where did you feel the conversation shift? When did they lean into you or not? But it's about having a conversation with somebody, your consultant, your team leader, whoever it is, rather than just numbers. And make sure as a leader that you are naming the tension honestly. We know that it's tough. You should be able to say to the person, look, I know that this is not where your energy naturally goes. I know that your strength is in candidate relationships or the quality of the match. But what we're working on here in the business is to try to get new clients, to get that experience for you to help us build the business. And the last thing I would do is when you leave that conversation, leave them with one thing, not 5 things. So, you know, a good coaching conversation is a memorable one for the person that you're speaking to. And they go away thinking, okay, I can put that into action. For example, next time you wrap up a placement call, try asking one question about what's coming next for the team. Just see what happens. It's small, it's safe, it's actionable, and they can put it into practice straight away.
I think the word that I'm going to pull out most of all is coaching.
Yeah,
It has to feel like an investment.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
an inspection. It's not a grill into what they're doing. That's something completely different. And the moment it feels like it's a test or it feels like it's an interrogation, people start managing the conversation instead of being honest about what's actually happening. And
yeah,
that
yeah,
goes back to your first point. It starts with what's working out, what's working well, not what's missing, what's working well, because that then builds people's confidence. And being told you're good at something enables you to go on and do more of it. Being told you're poor at something stops people doing it. So I think it's about celebrating the attempt, not the outcome. Consultants who tried hard to get the conversation going or tried hard to break into a client, okay, they learn more about what's working and what's not working than obviously those that are avoiding it altogether. So it is about a conversation about, as your comment said, about those one or two clients, not the 45 clients you tried to get in touch with and 30 of them didn't answer the phone, 30 spoke to you bluntly and didn't want to have with you. So I think that depth of those two client relationships will beat the breadth of 45 meaningless calls that haven't actually got you anywhere. So I think if you're going to do those type of coaching sessions, they need to be short, they need to be regular, and it needs to keep focused on growth, and it should be weekly, and that beats sort of 90 minutes once a quarter or half an hour once a month, etc. It needs to be there, and it needs to be about not just the pipeline, but it needs to be about what they know and how I think Annette put it on the chat there. It needs to be about what they know and having 5 or 6 different contact points constantly going on with that client so they can break into it. So if you only coach people who are really good at BD, you're not building your capability, you're managing your existing winners. The real growth comes from coaching those that are in that middle section, that
yeah,
average section,
yeah,
coaching those to get 10, 20% out of those better than they were. They're the people that really work. If you then coach your existing team as well and they grow their capabilities, then all of a sudden growth comes absolutely quickly and fast. But it is about individual people. It's not
yeah,
about the collective. The collective comes when each individual knows what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how to apply them, not when they're being beaten with a stick because they're poor at everything or they see themselves as being poor because they're only being told by the coach, you're poor at this, you're poor at this, you're poor at this, you're poor at this. Work at the strengths first.
yeah, absolutely.
Here's another question that we come across an awful lot. If a leader tried to build a BD culture, and let's say they built it once, twice, maybe 3 times, and watched it fade each time, it hasn't worked. Okay. What's the one thing you'd tell them to do differently on day one of their next attempt?
I would make BD a system, not a behavior. Behaviors fade, motivation fades. The attitude to winning new clients, the attitude to making some more calls, the attitude that you want to drill into people can fade over time. But if you have it as a proper system, then it works. Because motivation does fade, we know that. But if you've got a system that you follow, that doesn't fade because that's the system. That's what we do, and that's what you have to keep going. So it means kind of designing or repeating a ritual that doesn't depend on anyone being in the mood for doing BD. This is what we do, and this is how we do it. This is what we expect. These are the tools we're going to give you. This is the time we're going to do it. And it just becomes a systemized process rather than I don't know, it's 9 o'clock, let's all make 10 calls. Because if you're not motivated to do that, then you're not going to do it. But if you've got a system, it's a permanent fixture. It should become a permanent fixture of how your business operates. Like a billing run or a team meeting. It's just something that we do around here. And everybody can take part, but you've already assessed by your own learning and development, by your own charting, by looking at the DNA of the people. These are the people who can do this, and these are the people that we don't want to because they're good at something else. Yeah. And then that gets you into that place where you're going to see more new clients, either new clients within existing clients. Yeah. And we've used the example many times before. We've both had it where you've got all the contractors on the third floor, but on the fourth floor is another load that you didn't even know. So business development can be existing business and developing that, and also, of course, winning new clients. So in terms of the culture, in terms of the language, in terms of the incentives, make sure that business development in your place is a system, not a behavior.
So I like that because I'm all for that. But I also think if they've tried it and failed, I think what people tend to think is, oh, he's just rolling out that again, or she's just rolling that out again. It's never going to work. So I think you should make it smaller, start smaller so it feels more comfortable. Once you start to do that, then it's about picking a date, putting it in your diary, the manager's diary, and then keep it fixed in that diary every single week. So then you become committed to it publicly and it's in everyone's diary. I also think it's about telling them what success looks like in 90 days
Yeah.
and what that success looks like in 90 days when you're starting a BD program. It's not about the money because you'll get very little money from that first 90 days. Uh, yes, you'll get it out of your existing clients and maybe from your lapsed clients, but when you talk pure new business, then you're not going to get it from those new business clients because it's not going to come in droves in that way unless you're really, really lucky. So it's about how many meetings have you had, how many uh, conversations have you started, how many relationships have you start to break into, etc., and all those things that start to give. So it's about building in moments. I would then review it at 30 days. What's stopping us? What's working? What's not working? Rather than waiting to the end of that 90-day period to sort of look at it and work from there. So all the time we're defining what we're doing and looking at what we're doing. So we go back to Einstein's definition of madness, isn't it? You know, if you keep doing the same things and the results keep happening the same, then you've got to change it. And I had this conversation with someone on Friday at an event I was at. You know, they were talking about the problems that they were having, and I just said, you can't cure the problem with the same thinking that got you into that problem.
No,
And she
no.
said, well, how do I think differently? I said, stop working those 10 jobs that you're working at the moment that you're never going to fill. I can't do that. Yeah, you can, because now you can go out and do business development to find better clients. And it was that suddenly you could see the penny dropping, that she's just become subservient to the marketplace rather than owning her own business development pipeline. She's trying to fill roles that she can't fill, she'll never fill. And we worked it out that she was working on one role with one of her major clients where there was 7 other agencies on there. And she told me that she had a 90% a chance of filling it. So we suddenly worked out what the 7 agencies each had an equal percentage chance of filling it. Then we looked at the number of clients. We worked out it was about a 3% chance of filling the job. You know, and I said, are you really willing to bet on that 3%? She went, no. Right, let's change things.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's about building that momentum and building it slowly, but not measuring the money, measuring the little successes and the little wins along the way, then reviewing what's working, what's not working, and changing as we go. But then keeping it, as you said, it has to become habit. So put it in your diary. So every day that's in the diary, every day it's there, every day it's working. It doesn't have to be the same time every day. And it goes back to I was working with a client yesterday. She said, I have no time to do business because I'm working with my team. I said, okay, book yourself 2 meetings every day, hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon. She says, what am I going to do in those meetings? You're going to do business development. Everyone else thinks you're in a meeting. And she went, oh my God, that's so simple, isn't it? But it's about having that uniformity of doing it every single day rather than wasting time following stuff that's never going to win. You're never going to win. And I think that's it. Here's an uncomfortable.
Uh,
Go on, Dave. Sorry.
I was going to say, I remember losing my rag in the politest possible way that I could lose my rag when somebody stood up and they were talking about business development, and they said, and Martin's really good, he's really good, he's business development, and Rob just does delivery. And automatically they'd said, you're not very good because you just do delivery, and you're really good because you do business development. And you've got to lose that mystique as well. It's about the business and how you get the business moving forward. And yes, we want people to do business development, but in saying all of that, let's not lose any recognition there is that some people are really good at sourcing and matching and at the delivery side of things.
Well, if you think about it in that manner, and it's the right way to think about it, you can open as many doors as you like. If you can't then close them,
Yeah.
then what's the point? So you may have someone who's really good at opening doors and someone who's great at filling. Put those two together, you've got a great team. You may have
Yeah.
someone who's good at both. You may have good at one or the other. And that's the question. Are you only good at delivery and not good at that? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's an uncomfortable question for you then, Dave.
Ooh, uncomfortable.
Yeah. Is it possible that the reason a team isn't doing BD has nothing to do with the team and everything to do with the leader modeling exactly the same avoidance that the team comes out with when they say why they're not doing BD?
Well, it could be. My rhetorical answer to that would also be that could also be an excuse to mask the fact that they're not doing what they've been asked to do or what they've been trained to do or what the business needs them to do or the leader's not doing it. But, let's look at it from a leadership point of view. We should be able to do and execute well the things we ask our staff to do. And go back to my point earlier on that many leaders have set up recruitment businesses brilliantly because they think they can do it better themselves, and often they can. So if you are that person that over the years you've forgotten that actually you need to be the architect of business development, you need to be going out there and leading from the front, then there could be a reason. That could be part of a reason why your team aren't doing as well as they could be. I've used the line so many times, and I have it in conversations with leaders. Leaders cast a bigger shadow than they ever think they do. So if you're not leading by example and you're not leading from the front and you're not opening doors and you're not seeing clients and you're not developing relationships, then yeah, some of your people may be looking and thinking, well, she's not doing it, he's not doing it, he runs the business. That is an excuse, but it also could be a reason because we want to show our people how to do things, not tell them how to do things. And I think that's a really important facet of leadership.
It's interesting. I've had this conversation an awful lot, and I'm going to say right from solo businesses right up to large businesses. And I've always seen that where the leader is avoiding business development, they've just found a better way of describing that avoidance. Now, and I look at, say, some of the solo business, I've got three clients, I'm always busy with these three clients. But all of a sudden, those three clients stop and they're in deep trouble. I've got clients where we've got big clients, and they go, my top five clients have suddenly all stopped recruiting. But they're not bringing anything new. And I think the team copies what they see, not what they're told. So if the leader's diary doesn't have any client development in it, guess what? Most of your team won't. And I think it's a powerful thing that the leader can do is let their team watch them have those awkward conversations with clients where they survive it, go on a client visit and showing how good they are, show their potential, what's going on, visiting new clients with inexperienced and experienced consultants. So I think sometimes dusting off the old habits creates new experiences for those that are watching. And we've got to start to think about, you started a business because you were good at opening businesses. Not you're right what you said a bit early on. Very few people that I've come across have come from the delivery side of a business to open a
Yeah.
recruitment agency. Mostly really good salespeople, but they lose that. So, you know, it's the question that sort of stings, isn't it? Why not doing business development? And I see leaders who built the business on their own BD and then quietly stop because they think they can afford to stop. But what they've actually not done is replace themselves. And that includes with, solo businesses. I'm in a nice situation. I've got 3 or 4 clients. It's not about replacing yourself because you are the delivery person as well. But if you stop doing that business development, then one's falling between the other. So you've got a problem. So I think your businesses with teams and solo businesses, you can tell the difference between a leader who is coaching from memory or those who are still in the arena and still converting business, developing business, opening new businesses. And you and I, Dave, know that we still do that because we've got to open our own clients and develop our own clients, and we're always looking at how we can probe into the market and do that. And I think the agencies that are growing fastest now are the leaders who are still doing those things, going out with their people, developing their people. They're in charge of the business development. They're not just saying when I was this, etc. So if you stop doing everything that you're doing now and start doing something different, don't be surprised that your team will follow you. So if you stop doing just delivery and start doing business development, people will follow you because they see what you do and they will follow what you do. And I think it's an important thing that the leader has to lead that business development strategy, not anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last question, then final one. If you only kept one type of consultant in your team, so the brilliant delivery who never develops business, or the average delivery who brings in, let's say, 3 new clients a quarter, which one actually builds your business and which one would enable you to sell your business further down the track?
Oh, I feel like giving a kind of politician sitting on the fence answer in that because genuinely you need both. You just said it in the last question. You can't if you've got somebody who's really good at winning business but can't be delivered to, and they don't deliver to it, then you're missing out. So you need a balance of both. Both need those sort of skills. The best delivery people are the ones that can unearth. Go back to that person's second question. Can earth and have intelligent business conversations, even if they don't have much to deliver to, they pass it on to somebody else who can who can understand the client a bit more, understand the direction the client's taking. A little bit of business intelligence goes a long way as you win new clients. So I think you need both. Good recruiters are the ones that build relationships. In the world where AI is a part of what we do now and where jobs potentially can be replaced by AI, by ML, if you are there to build relationships, to create empathy, to build culture, to build trust, then they're the skills that will enable you to thrive. And yes, of course, most companies need to have more clients and develop more clients because they can't just rest on their laurels. So you've got to have both those skills. And I would want a business, if I was looking to buy a business or invest in a business, I'd want to look at what the balance is and how often are they winning new clients. How often is that top 10, that top 20 client is changing? Do they have a long tail of 1%, 2% and 40% of their business with one client? As you said at the beginning in terms of stats, that's nervous. So you do need the best of both.
So I'm going to steal a line that I heard back in the early 90s from an M&A person coming in to view the business that I was at Lorient at the time when we were when we were looking to float on the AIM market at the time. And their comment was it was quite sort of enlightening to a certain degree. Delivery keeps your business running. Business development makes your business worth something beyond the desk. So if you've just got a desk where you're just running your own clients and billing in your own clients and not growing that client number, actually what you are is you're a delivery person. But if you're building something and adding new clients and you're building it beyond your desk, and he said the brilliant deliverers, are a cost that you learn to live with as a business, but your average BD person actually is an asset and could be a compounding asset and growing value every quarter if you did that.
Good luck.
So buyers don't pay or buyers don't pay for who can fill the role fastest. They pay for who can build client relationships that exist independently beyond one person, including the leader. And with how many times we've talked about that, about having more people into a client and working from there, loads and loads. So if your business would lose its best client the day your best delivery person leaves or your best BD person leaves, then you haven't got a business. What you've got is a very expensive job to fill. So I think the question forces choices of most leaders that they've never sort of considered. You know, there's a difference between delivery and there's a difference between BD and what goes on. And the agency with the real value behind them are the ones where client relationships sit within the business, not with that one irreplaceable person if they left. And if
Yeah.
you take the
Yeah.
average delivery person and then start to grow that person, then you're in a far different position because you've got more average people than you have superstars.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm going to finish it.
That's a good message to
Yeah,
finish.
because I think that's the bit that we've got to think about. You need both sides, but you need that business development side to carry the business forward, and you can't let that one person be the person that's the irreplaceable person. It should be within the business from there. Ladies and gents, thanks for your time. Much appreciated for attending today. Thanks very much. Next week, we've got a really interesting one that leads on from this week, which is stop filling jobs and start owning your market. It's the intelligence model that makes you irreplaceable, because that's what we've just talked about, being irreplaceable. So it's the stop filling jobs and start owning your market, the intelligence model that makes your business irreplaceable. Dave, thanks for your time. Ladies and gents, thanks for your time. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Cheers.
And
Bye.
good luck to my Scottish friends against Haiti, because we'll be back next week and hopefully Scotland will have 3 points and we'll see how England get on.
Oh my God. The football's on.
It's
See you
on.
next week,
It's
guys.
on.